Alright, so in this video what I'm going to do is take you through once you have an image that is converted to black and white and it's saved as a PDF file, and that you did in the previous video with watching the Photoshop, LED Photoshop video. It's taking that image now and converting it and getting it ready to vector cut and prepped for your LED sign. So I'm going to take you through the basics of that. You're going to go into File, you're going to go to New, and I'm in Adobe Illustrator currently. And within Illustrator, I'm going to call this LED Sign Project. And once you give it your file name, we're going to change the size of the project. Size of the project is going to be the layout. It would be 16.5 and 12.5 inches in width, and the height is going to be 6.5. So again, that is width 12.5, height 6.5, 6.5 inches. And make sure that your units is in fact set to inches and not set to points or anything like that, or centimeters or pixels. Make sure that it is in inches. Orientation, right, you can keep it in a landscape orientation. Don't worry about these items on the bottom and click OK. And this is what you're going to see. I'm just going to change the size of this a little bit. Alright, so you have a better view of it. Alright, so here's my layout. Now, the next step is we're going to go into File, and we're going to basically place our image in here. So I'm going to go to File, and I'm going to go to Place, and I am going to place the image that I saved as a PDF. It's going to give you a preview. Click OK. And I'm going to drop that in here. So there's my image. Alright. I'm going to then image trace it. And this is when hopefully you had a fairly high resolution image. So we're just going to basically vectorize this image so it looks clean and not so pixelated. You can see how it cleaned up the image quality, and that looks pretty good. And I'm just going to expand it, and it looks pretty good. Alright, I am not going to put any vector cut lines around this. This is just a raster component right now. Now the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put a outline around this. So I'm going to go to my tool palette here, and right under the text tool there is a rectangular tool. I'm going to left click and hold that, and I get some more tools. I want this rounded rectangle tool, and I'm going to take that rounded rectangle tool, and I'm just going to basically create a rounded rectangle around this. And you notice how it has a white fill because it basically, my other image is behind this now. So I want no fill. And I do want to have a black outline for this rounded rectangle, and I want that this is going to be a cut item, so it's going to be a 0.1 cut, and that's what I'm looking for. All right, the two main tools you guys are going to be working with once we start getting in here, and you should have some exposure obviously with your first project. Your locker magnet is your selection tool and direct selection tool. Some of these tools you've already have worked with. This particular rounded rectangle, I'm going to select it now, and I want to make sure that it's this exact size. So select the rounded rectangle. I'm going to go over here to my size constraints. I want to make sure that these size constraints are unlinked right now. So make sure that they're unlinked. I'm going to change the size of this to 12 by 6.25. Alright, and that gives me the exact size that I want. I'm going to lay that onto my layout, and so far off to a good start. Alright, The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to press Control R. It's going to bring up my rulers. So Control R. And I want to put a center line there. I want to start centering some of this stuff up and getting this clean. So if I look at, if I left click and hold on this vertical ruler, I'm going to drag out. So I'm going to left click and drag out from that vertical ruler a center line that's at 6 1/4 right there. Okay. Now when I select my graphic, I'm going to bump that using my arrow keys on my keyboard to make sure that's aligned. I also want to make sure that my outline, everything's kind of aligned to that center mark there. Okay, so that looks pretty good. The other thing I'm going to do is I need to create a guideline that is 1 inch away from the bottom. Now what's that for? When we eventually cut this all out and put this onto the LED, into the LED sign base, it's going to sink down into that base about 1 inch. So we can't have any graphic area within 1 inch of the bottom. Alright, because as it sets down in there. So I'm going to select the horizontal, I'm going to left click on that horizontal ruler, left click and hold. I'm going to drag down a guideline that is from the bottom of this cut line of a rounded rectangle. I want it to be 1 inch above that. Alright, so I'm going to move this right about there. Alright, you can see I have a little image right below that. That's my no-go area, so I'm going to select my image that I inserted in and just raise that up again using my arrow keys so no part of this gets engraved below that no-go 1 inch from the bottom guideline. Okay, so now I have my image in there, and I have, this is just going to be a rounded rectangle cut that goes around here. Now I could do a custom cut. Let's say I didn't want all this empty space in here and I want to have it more curved through here. I could do that. I can select my arc tool. So again, I'm going to left click. There's my line tool. It's the fourth one on the left hand side of the tool palette. I'm going to select that, go down to arc, and I could pick a point, maybe from like this point here, and drag that out to the center line and maybe create an arc. And if I go back to my selection tool, actually my direct selection tool, let's do that one again. Arc tool. And the one thing I forgot to mention when you do this, when you put your arc in there, make sure that you give it a fill color. I forgot to do that initially. So black, stroke of 0.1 is going to be a cut item. Now I can go back to my selection tool, my direct selection tool. I can select that particular arc, and I can adjust. I get these handlebars that you can adjust. So if I wanted to curve that up, just make sure nothing goes outside of your original rounded rectangle that we put in there. So let's say it was something like that. It would trim out some of this excess acrylic out here when I would work with the project. I could do that, and then I could take this image here, this line segment that I created, this arc, and I could basically copy this. If I just select it, Control C and Control V, I get this line over here, and then I can just right click on it, go into transform and reflect that vertically 90 degrees, click OK. It's going to flip it around, and it's going to make it identical to the other side. Now I just have to place it. I'll use my arrow keys. I'm going to place that exactly where I want it. Alright, and now I have this identical arc going around here. So that's how you can do some custom, I mean, I could do some other things in here, but you can make some custom cut lines. And the other thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back over some of these. I don't need all these cut lines, so I'm going to delete some of these out. And I just want to make sure that this line here, I'm going to select that. You'll see here in a second what I'm doing. I'm basically make sure these points are connected. Alright. So I want those anchor points to be connected there, but so this would be kind of the my cut that I'm going to be doing. I'm going to just use my magic wand or my magnifying glass and zoom in here a little bit. That point there, I'm just going to clean that up. Take that anchor point. Alright, so this is one option for you. Again, using my magnifying glass, if I select that and I press Alt, I can zoom out. Alright, but you can do any type of custom, unless you want to do the rounded rectangle. You do some custom lines or arcs, clean that up. The other thing that we're going to do now is also put for the electronics later on. I'm going to put another rounded rectangle on the bottom down here. So I'm just going to make a rounded rectangle, and we'll change the size here. The size of your rounded rectangle, you want a width of 1 inch and a height of 0.75, and you're going to make sure the stroke is 0.1. It's black. I'm going to take this rounded rectangle now, and I want to make sure that this is in the, I'm going to have 2 of these, one on each side. And the reason why I put it on each side now is really just for the fact you can kind of decide later what size you want the cord to come out. You know, if you have an outlet on your left-hand side, let's say you're putting this on top of a dresser, and you want, after thinking about it, I can have the electronics running to either the left or the right side. So that's why I put it on 2. You don't have to decide right now. You can do that later, so it doesn't hurt having the 2. So I'm just going to copy and paste this, and then you have the option of running the electronics to either side once we get to that point. And again, I just have those lines overlapping right here, so that's going to get cut out. Let's see, I don't know if it copied. It doesn't seem to want to copy and paste. Let's make a new one. Alright, again, it's going to be 1 by 0.75. Place that where I want it. And so far we're looking pretty good. There's a couple more steps and we'll be wrapping this up. So one of the last things you need to do on the project is to invert, or I should say mirror this image. So what we're going to do using our selection tool, we're going to just click on that and selection cursor and just drag a box across everything. And I'm going to right click, we're going to go over to transform, and we're going to reflect this vertical at 90 degrees, click OK. And we're going to reflect it. And the reason being is we're going to engrave basically on the back side of the acrylic. So when we when it is engraves, it's backwards. But when we flip it, it's going to be on the back side. It'll be right reading when we look at it. So that's the reason why we do that. And then the final thing that we are going to do is print a computer proof. So to show you that, we're just going to go to File, Print. And you're going to change your printer type to Toshiba Black. Go into Setup. Actually, before you go into Setup, Marks and Bleed, all printers marks, now set up. Click on Continue. And we're going to Preferences. You're going to change paper size. The original is going to be 8.5 by 14, and then the print size is going to be 8.5 by 11. It's going to scale it for you. Make sure you have it landscape. Click OK. Print and print. All right, if you have any questions, let your